What up, homeboys? So Apollo 3 is coming out, and I figured there's not a lot of guide content for it. Like, nobody can really research what they should pick or what they could use right now. So I figured I would help you guys figure that out. And we're gonna do a little tier list, a little summary of the best classes for each role. And we're gonna start with DPS, why not? Okay, so we're gonna go check out how the classes are doing. And by the way, little disclaimer, some classes are gonna perform better in certain patches with certain gear levels than others. We only have access to the 4.3.4 data of people that already got the gear from that patch. So, you know, this is gonna be more late game oriented. So maybe your classes are not going to be mentioned here as a high level class, but it could very easily be a very good class in Fireland. And another disclaimer, every class has at least one viable spec for DPS in Cataclysm. Like, Cataclysm is not nearly as imbalanced as Vanilla or TBC was. They all are pretty competent, and the difference between class and class is not really that big, except of course at the highest levels of play, and most of you are not at the highest levels of play. So, you know, my best advice that I could ever give you is that you research the classes yourself and you find what you think would be fun to play, because the numbers are not gonna be that different from one to another, except for maybe some fights that really hate certain classes. Like, for example, Spine of Deathwing, it is pretty much mandatory to get Blood Death Knight to do that fight. Or, for example, let's say Firelands. In Firelands, balanced druids are actually pretty strong, even though later on they are not that strong. But anyway, we're gonna go check out the logs that we do have. They are from the last patches, and we're gonna see what classes can do with the best gear in the game. Okay guys, we're on the Twinstar site, and credit where credit is due. Twinstar has one of the best databases of the entire private server environment right now. Like, they got great tools on their site, and I use them a lot even when I'm not playing on their servers, so props to them for this. Apollo is part of the Twinstar network, I gotta give them credit for that. And we got the logs of different boss fights. I chose 2 fights right now. I got Deathwing, actually, Heroic 25, let me change that. And we got Morchok. They are both in Dragon Soul, the last raid of Cataclysm, and I chose them to show you a very particular point of how Cataclysm works. You see, Morchok is pretty much a tank and spank. There isn't a lot of mechanics to deal with on that fight. And meanwhile, Madness of Deathwing is a fight that really benefits burst damage, among other things. So what you will see in a second is that the results are gonna be widely different. If you check this out here, this is a tank and spike straight up damage fight, and you can instantly see what's going on. All the top DPSers are rogues, and most of them are combat actually, and some are assassination, for what I could check. Like, we're gonna check that in a minute. And why is that? Well, in a tank and spike fight, when you don't have to move at all, rogues can get behind the boss and backstab it. And when rogues can do that in Cataclysm, they are easily, on the late game, the best class in the game. They do insane, ridiculous damage. Look at this dude, he pulled 45k. He has the best gear on the game, of course, but still, you know, it's pretty crazy. And then if we go a little down, the next class is Warlock, mostly Demonology. And then we keep on going down, and we start seeing Arms Warriors and Fire Mages. And then we will start seeing all the other classes. Nothing notable here, but check the difference. The best Paladin we could find is doing 27,000 damage. The best Warlock, the best Rogue is doing 45,000. That's just ridiculous. Like, rogues can do double the damage of a poor red pally. But you can see the pattern here. On a straight up tank and spank fight, Rogues are the best, straight up the best DPS in the game, followed by Warlocks and Mages. Armed Warriors are also pretty strong. If you actually check out the difference, you see here 31k to 45k, the second class is 36k, so you know, I would say Rogue is on like tier S plus, the best tier in the game of DPS. And below that, like the next tier is pretty even. You see Warlocks, Rogues and Mages, they are doing similar damage to each other. And after that you can see there's Balanced Druids, Shadow Priests, which are actually like for their utility. Shadow Priests have a good utility, so even though they are not the best DPSers, they are still desirable in a group, so don't sleep on Shadow Priests. And below that we get Shamans. Actually Enhancement Shamans are more or less the same as as Elemental Shamans. And then we get Unholy Death Knights. Frost Death Knights are actually very weak. If you in the late game, if you want to play a Death Knight DPS, I'm afraid Unholy is the way to go. And that's pretty much it for the tank and spank fight. That is a fight of a boss fight that doesn't have a particular mechanic. And I wanna change it up a little bit and show you why I think that distinction is important. This is the Madness of Deathwing. The Madness of Deathwing is a fight that benefits, among other things, burst damage and mobility and survivability to a certain extent, not that much really, but you know, like there's a lot of mechanics to deal with on that fight. And what you see here is instantly that rogues are not nearly as good anymore, because they cannot just sit behind Deathwing and backstab him all day, so their damage is reduced a lot. And you see here, Arms Warriors, they also got a great cleaving AoE, so they can deal with all the ads and stuff. And you can see a much different distribution from the rogue to warrior, priest, mage. It is pretty much more balanced. And why is that? The numbers are still the same, by the way. Like, if you want to just top the more numbers, rogue is still the way to go. But what I'm trying to aim at here is that mechanics are always gonna be king. Mechanics are king. If you can deal with mechanics, it doesn't matter the spec you're playing, unless you're playing like a particularly awful spec like Frost Death Knight. If you're dealing with the mechanics properly, like these warriors that are best equipped to deal with the mechanics of this fight, you're gonna top the DPS charts. And also keep in mind, DPS middles can be cheesed. So you know, it's not like this is a normal fight. Just because you see 100k, he's like pulling multiple ads at once. That's not happening just because he's hitting the boss. Okay, he's abusing the mechanics to make this damage. But yes, to close the DPS section of the video, Rogue is the best DPS in the game for flat, straight up single target DPS. Warrior is probably the best AoE DPS. And then you got Warlocks and Mages. They are pretty similar in levels to those. And then you got below that Druids, which I recommend Balanced Druids if you want a DPS. And then you get Paladins. And what am I missing out on? Then you get Elemental Shamans followed by Enhancement Shamans. They are not that different. The problem is that Enhancement Shamans suffer from mechanics a lot more than Elemental Shamans because they are melee. And then you got Shadow Priests that don't do the best damage, but they got valuable utility. So, you know, it's still a very competent class if you wanna play. Am I missing out a class? Oh yeah, Hunters. Hunters are just bad, okay? Just play a marksmanship hunter and be the bitch of the raid leader. That's it. Sadly, the Hunters are not the best thing right now. Okay guys, we're moving on to healing. And we are also gonna compare Morchok and Deathwing for healers because of a very simple reason. There isn't a bad or a good healer in Cataclysm really. Healers excel at different things. So if you check out what kind of encounter you're facing, some healers are gonna be greatly superior to others. So again, we're on a single target tank and spunk fight, and you can see right here, priests and paladins. That's the best healers you can get late game. Followed by druids. You always need a few druids, in a raid no matter what, because of their huts. They are extremely important in Cataclysm because bosses do a lot more damage than they used to do in previous expansion to the tanks. So keeping a lot of huts on the tank is vital. But here you go. Single target, priest and paladin is the way. Bar none, no questions asked. But if you go all the way to Deathwing, which has a lot of AoE damage, you see something very different. Shamans and druids become favored. Because shamans with chain heal and druids with all their AoE heals and heals on time spells excel at AoE healing. So there you have it. If you are worried about rolling a paladin or a shaman or a priest or a druid to heal and you're worried that you might not be that good or that you may be in trouble because of your choice of class, let me assure you, you will still find a raid if you are doing your job properly, because every fight, AoE fights need druids and shamans, and single target fights need priests and paladins. You cannot be without them. Every class is well represented on the healing point, so you will not have any trouble at all. Okay guys, and now we're moving to tanking, and tanking is gonna be a more subjective play on my part, because the reality is that there isn't very good data for it, but I'm gonna give you a little bit of a briefing on what every single class excels at for tanking, and you will be able to decide on your own. First of all, we got the warrior, the OG tank, the basic tank. And warriors are pretty particular. They actually have like very decent AoE tanking abilities, and they have great mobility, perhaps the best mobility of a tank in Cataclysm. And they got a very extensive toolkit. They got the best toolkit overall, actually. They got the most variants, the most skill expression, kind of. But the truth of the matter is their numbers in the late game become very weak. In the early game they are okay, and they are still decent tanks, but you will see that in top tier guilds they will not be very well represented. Again, they are still perfectly decent tanks. You can probably do all the content with a warrior tank, but if you wanna be at the top efficiency at the highest level, warriors are sadly not advisable. Then we got the Prot Paladin, a staple, one of my favorites, and the Prot Paladin is obviously, like in pretty much every expansion, they excel at AoE tanking. They are some of the best AoE tankers in the game because of their mitigation that they get with their passive shield blockings, and they are they are the most durable tank in the game. So in a progression fight, they are the strongest tanks to put in front of the boss. They will be able to survive the most damage because they got exceptional cooldowns like their Guardian of Ancient Kings that is gonna keep them alive for much longer. And they are also a very simple and easy class to play, perhaps the easiest class to play of all the ones that I'm gonna talk about in the list for tanking, and it is one of my favorites. I am seriously considering playing a Prot Paladin on Apollo 3. I am gonna play a tank. I don't really know quite what tank I'm gonna play yet, but I am planning to play a tank, and the Prot Paladin is always in my consideration. They are not the best main tanks, but they will always be great off tanks, and you can find a spot in any raid, even the top tier guilds, for doing the best progression content, because paladins are just that useful. Moving on to the druid, bear druids are perhaps the highest single target threat in the game. They are very durable, not as durable as a paladin, but maybe single target they are probably as durable as a paladin. Overall, they don't really need that much gear to function, so they are gonna be strong early on in the server, so you should consider that if you don't plan on sticking around for long. Pretty much a very solid class. One thing that I gotta clarify for a lot of you, because I know most of you are not gonna raid, and that's fine, and that is that bear druids are, in my opinion, the best class to carry a dungeon. If you're gonna do LFR with randoms that you don't know, and you got a bear druid, you can carry through a bad healer and you can carry through a bad DPS just fine. Other classes, namely the Blood Decay for example, struggle doing the same. So, you know, if you are not gonna play with a guild, if you're not gonna play with people that you know are good, and you just wanna do some dungeons and chill, bear tank is one of the best classes for you to consider. Finally, we get the Blood Dead Knight. Blood Dead Knights are pretty much universally considered the best period tank on the late game, the best Dragon Soul tank, so to say. And that is because they scale really hard with gear because of their abilities. Blood Dead Knights rely on their active abilities to tank. They don't have a lot of passive mitigation like a Paladin would. A Paladin just stays in there and they get like 30% block for free and all that stuff, so they got a lot of passive mitigation, but Blood Dead Knights have active mitigation. You need to strike the opponent and you need to be playing your rotation very well to survive. And that comes with a lot of problems, especially if you're playing on high latency like I will be playing. But if you can pull it off and you can get good gear, they become the strongest tank in the game. They also got really strong AoE damage with, what's it called, Blood and Decay? It's like a red consecrate, don't think too much about it. They got a lot of nice cooldowns, but again, if you wanna chill and just do dungeons, I do not recommend Blood Decays. They take a lot of APM, they take a lot of thought to be played properly, and if you mess up once, you get destroyed, okay? You don't have any passive mitigation at all, unlike a Paladin or a Warrior, so if you mess up, you lose your parry rate, you lose like all your mitigation, and you die. And that's also why healers hate Blood Decays. Like, you will be hard pressed to find a healer that doesn't mind healing a Blood Decay. Even the good Blood Decays suffer through very bad spikes in damage, because it's kind of RNG reliant, especially when you're on lower gear. And that means that healers gotta pick up the slack for the bad moments in your gameplay. And I can tell you right now, healers do not like working hard. Okay, I played a healer all my life. Healers do not like picking up the slack. But again, if you wanna try hard, if you wanna be the ultimate autismo guy and you wanna be on Dragon Soul day one, if you wanna do all the content, Blood Decay is the way to go, bar none. Overall, I would say that the worst tank on this list, and again, the difference between the worst tank and the best tank is not that big in Cataclysm like it used to be on other expansions. So, you know, you can still pull it off just fine, but in my opinion, the worst tank, the weakest tank, sadly is the Warrior, though early on they are decent. Then I would say the Druid or the Paladin are pretty similar. I'd say the Druid is more specialized on single target and the Paladin is more specialized on AoE tanking. And they are quite proficient at it, and ideally you want one of each on a raid. And then lastly, you need a Blood Decay on the late game, because Blood Decays are just the strongest, period. They got the best numbers if you're playing them properly, which is not easy at all. But if you're playing them properly, they are the strongest tanks in the game. Overall, the only class I wouldn't recommend for tanking, unless you're a casual player, is a Warrior, because honestly, they are just the they are just the jack of all trades, but the master of none. They don't have any specialization that they can do that nobody else can outside from their mobility, which admittedly is very strong in some fights. But overall, there's no reason, it's very hard for me to justify playing a Warrior over a Paladin or a Druid, even, not even mentioning the Blood Decay. So, yeah, you know, please don't let me telling you what's the best class make you not play a class you wanna play. Like, Warriors got very fun gameplay, and like if you wanna flex DPS, Arms Warriors are ridiculously good. So, you know, if you just wanna off tank every so often, do not sleep on the Warriors. They are just fine, they can do all the content just fine, but they are just weaker. Anyways, guys, that's every class for you. This is a very over-the-top, very brief summary of every single class. Bottom line is, pretty much every class is viable. In Cataclysm, the numbers are pretty similar, like the top class and the worst class are not that different, except at the super highest levels of competition. And just pick what you think is fun, man. Just pick what you think is fun. I might do a couple specific class videos if you show me some interest for it in the comments. Like, I don't know, if you wanna see a video about warlocks or shamans, those are the two classes that I know very well on Cataclysm. I may be able to do that. Like, if you wanna see me covering a particular class and going over a brief guide and what that class is good at, show me in the comments, tell me in the comments. If you like this video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, for we got a lot more coming, and trust me, we got a lot more coming, because Apollo 3 is coming out and I'm gonna be streaming and playing the shit out of it just for the kicks. I'm gonna be probably farming transmog and God knows what. It's gonna be basically a just chatting stream with dragons on the background for a while. I just love that books a lot. And anyway, guys, behave, have a great day. If you wanna support the channel, check out our merch, and see you later.